Sarah Matthews had always prided herself on having the perfect life. At 34, she lived in a beautiful brownstone in Brooklyn Heights with her husband of 8 years, David, who worked as a senior partner at a prestigious Manhattan law firm. Their marriage had been the envy of their friends, two successful professionals who seemed to have it all figured out. David was charming, ambitious, and devoted, or so Sarah had always believed. The morning of March 15th started like any other. David kissed her goodbye at 6:30 a.m., his usual time for catching the early train into the city. His briefcase was perfectly organized, his suit impeccable, and his smile warm as he promised to call her during his lunch break. "Don't forget, I'm flying to Chicago tonight for the Morrison case," he reminded her, straightening his tie in the hallway mirror. "I'll probably be tied up in depositions all week, so don't worry if you don't hear from me much." Sarah nodded, accustomed to David's demanding travel schedule. As a marketing director for a boutique agency, she understood the pressures of high-stakes, professional life. She trusted him implicitly. Trust that had been built over years of shared dreams, late-night conversations, and what she believed was complete honesty between them. After David left, Sarah went through her morning routine. A run through Brooklyn Bridge Park, a shower and breakfast while reviewing client presentations. Her phone buzzed with a text from David at 11:47 a.m. "Boarding now, love you. We'll call tonight from the hotel." The day passed normally. Sarah had back-to-back client meetings, lunch with her assistant Emma to discuss an upcoming campaign, and a conference call with their West Coast partners. It wasn't until she was riding the subway home that evening that she noticed the first crack in her perfect world. Her phone rang, David's number flashing on the screen. But when she answered, all she heard was muffled conversation and what sounded like restaurant noise in the background. She could make out David's laugh, but there was something else. A woman's voice, light and flirtatious, definitely not a colleague discussing legal strategies. "David?" she said into the phone, but the line went dead. When she tried calling back, it went straight to voicemail. She assumed it was a pocket dial from the restaurant where he was probably having dinner with clients. These things happened. But doubt, once planted, has a way of growing. Over the next few days, small inconsistencies began to pile up. David's hotel, the Fairmont Chicago, had no record of his reservation when Sarah called to surprise him with flowers. His assistant, Jennifer, seemed flustered when Sarah asked about the Morrison case details, eventually admitting she wasn't familiar with any current Chicago litigation. Most troubling of all, David's credit card statements, which arrived while he was away, showed charges at expensive Manhattan restaurants during times he claimed to be in depositions. Sarah found herself doing things she'd never imagined. Checking David's location on Find My Friends, which showed his phone as being in downtown Manhattan, not Chicago, calling his office and being told he was working remotely this week, and even driving past his favorite lunch spot near his office building. Thattu. Marriage she'd thought was built on solid ground began to feel like quicksand beneath her feet. 8 years of shared memories suddenly seemed questionable. Had she been naive? Had there been signs she'd missed? The David who held her hand during movies, who surprised her with weekend trips to wine country, who talked about starting a family, was any of that real? Her sister Maya noticed the change immediately when they met for dinner at their usual Thursday spot in the village. "You look like you haven't slept in days," Maya observed, studying Sarah's face across the candlelit table. "What's going on?" Sarah found herself spilling everything. The mysterious phone call, the hotel with no reservation, the credit card charges, the growing list of small lies that were adding up to something she didn't want to acknowledge. "Maybe there's an explanation," Maya said carefully, though her expression suggested she doubted it. "Have you tried just asking him directly?" "How do you ask your husband if he's cheating without sounding like a paranoid wife?" Sarah replied, twirling her pasta absently. especially when part of me still can't believe it's possible. But as the week wore on, Sarah's denial began to crumble. David's phone calls became shorter and more infrequent. His explanations for the hotel confusion grew increasingly elaborate and defensive, and most damning of all, when he claimed to be exhausted from 12-hour days in conference rooms, his voice carried none of the fatigue she'd learned to recognize over their years together. By Friday, Sarah had made a decision. She was going to confront him the moment he walked through their door on Sunday evening. She would demand the truth, no matter how much it might hurt. She owed herself that much. What she didn't know was that the truth would find her first in the most unexpected and devastating way possible. Sunday afternoon arrived with unseasonable warmth for March, and Sarah decided to treat herself to a solo shopping trip in Soho. She needed the distraction, and retail therapy seemed like the perfect antidote to a week spent drowning in suspicions about her husband. David wasn't due home until evening, giving her plenty of time to clear her head before their inevitable confrontation. She spent hours wandering through boutiques, trying on clothes she didn't need and sampling perfumes at Sephora. For brief moments, she almost forgot about the knot of anxiety that had taken up permanent residence in her stomach. Almost. It was 4:30 p.m. when she found herself at the flagship store of a high-end department store on Spring Street, admiring a silk scarf that reminded her of their honeymoon in Tuscany. The memory stung now. Had David been faithful even then? How far back did his deceptions go? Her phone buzzed with a text. "Flight delayed. Won't be home until late. Order dinner without. Me, love you." The message should have been routine, but something about it felt off. The tone was too casual, too dismissive. In 8 years of marriage, David had never told her to order dinner without him when returning from a business trip. He always wanted to hear about her week, to reconnect after time apart. This felt like an excuse. On impulse, Sarah opened her laptop and checked David's flight status. American Airlines Flight 1847 from Chicago to JFK, the flight he'd mentioned taking, was actually on time, not delayed. Her hands trembled slightly as she screenshot the information. The sales associate approached with a concerned expression. "Are you all right, miss? You look pale." Sarah managed a weak smile and declined to purchase the scarf. Instead, she found herself walking aimlessly through the streets of Soho, her mind racing. If David was lying about the flight delay, where was he? And more importantly, who was he with? Her phone rang, Maya's name on the screen. "I've been thinking about our conversation all week," her sister said without preamble. "I hired a private investigator when I suspected Tom was cheating 3 years ago. I still have his contact information if you want it." Sarah stopped walking, standing frozen on the busy sidewalk as pedestrians flowed around her. "Maya, I don't know if I'm ready for that." "Sometimes the not knowing is worse than the truth," Maya said gently. "But it's your call. I'm here either way." After hanging up, Sarah realized she was standing outside the Ritz-Carlton. On another impulse, or perhaps driven by some subconscious instinct, she walked into the elegant lobby. The marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and well-dressed guests moved purposefully through the space. She approached the concierge desk, her heart hammering. "Excuse me, I'm supposed to meet my husband here, but I can't remember which restaurant he mentioned. David Matthews?" He might have made a reservation. "For this evening?" The young man behind the desk typed efficiently on his computer. "I'm sorry, I don't see any restaurant reservations under that name today. However, we do have a David Matthews who checked into one of our suites yesterday afternoon." The world tilted. Sarah gripped the edge of the marble counter to steady herself. "Yesterday afternoon, are you sure?" "Yes, ma'am, suite 1247. Would you like me to call up to the room?" "No," Sarah said quickly, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, that's fine. I'll just text him." She stumbled away from the desk, her legs unsteady. David had been in New York all week, staying at the Ritz-Carlton while telling her he was in Chicago. The elaborate story about the Morrison case, the non-existent depositions, the delayed flight, all lies. Sarah found herself in the hotel bar, ordering a double vodka tonic with shaking hands. The bartender, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, seemed to recognize distress when she saw it. "Rough day?" she asked sympathetically. Sarah laughed bitterly. "You could say that. I just discovered my husband has been lying to me all week about being out of town for business. Apparently, he's been staying here instead." The bartender's expression shifted to one of uncomfortable recognition. "Oh, honey," she said quietly. "You're not the first wife to discover something like that in this hotel. I'm sorry." The validation that this was really happening, that her suspicions weren't the product of paranoia, hit Sarah like a physical blow. She downed half her drink in one swallow, the alcohol burning her throat. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from David. "Miss you. Can't wait to see you tonight." The casual cruelty of it, lying to her face while probably planning to spend the evening with another woman, made Sarah feel physically ill. She paid for her drink and rushed to the lobby bathroom where she splashed cold water on her face and tried to compose herself. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a stranger staring back, a woman whose life was falling apart in real time, whose marriage was revealed to be built on lies, whose husband was at that very moment possibly upstairs with his mistress. Sarah made a decision. She was going to suite 1247. She rode the elevator to the 12th floor, her reflection multiplied infinitely in the mirrored walls. Each version of herself looked more determined than the last. She was done being the naive wife, done accepting explanations that didn't add up, done living in willful ignorance. The hallway was plush and quiet, with thick carpeting that muffled her footsteps. Room 1247 was at the far end, and Sarah could see a "Do Not Disturb" sign hanging on the handle. She pressed her ear to the door, but heard nothing. Standing there in that hotel hallway, Sarah realized she was at a crossroads. She could knock on that door and confront whatever truth waited on the other side, or she could walk away and pretend she'd never been there. She could maintain the illusion of her marriage for a little while longer, but as she stood there, weighing her options, she heard the soft chime of the elevator arriving at the floor behind her. And in that moment, Sarah Matthews was about to discover that sometimes the truth finds you whether you're ready for it or not. The elevator chime echoed down the hallway like a death knell. Sarah stood frozen outside suite 1247, her hand halfway to the door, when she heard familiar voices approaching. Her heart stopped as she recognized David's laugh, warm and rich, the same laugh that had charmed her on their first date 9 years ago. But now it was directed at someone else. Panic seized her. She couldn't be caught standing outside his hotel room like some desperate stalking wife. Whatever dignity remained in this situation, she refused to surrender it. Sarah quickly ducked into an alcove near the ice machine, pressing herself against the wall and praying she wouldn't be seen. "The reservation isn't until 8, came David's voice, clearer now as they approached. "We have plenty of time." "Good," replied a woman's voice, sultry and confident. "I was hoping we could enjoy the suite a little longer. The view is incredible." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She recognized that voice. It was Vanessa Chen, the junior partner from David's law firm. They'd met at the company Christmas party just 4 months ago. Sarah remembered thinking how beautiful and accomplished she was, how she and David had seemed to have such animated conversations about legal strategy. She'd felt proud that her husband worked with such brilliant colleagues. Now she understood the true nature of those conversations. Through the narrow gap between the wall and a decorative plant, Sarah watched as David slipped his keycard into the door of Suite 1247. He was wearing the casual clothes he typically reserved for weekends, jeans, and a button-down shirt that Sarah had bought him for his birthday last year. Vanessa wore a flowing red dress that hugged her petite frame perfectly, her long black hair cascading over her shoulders. They looked comfortable together, intimate in a way that spoke of familiarity and routine. This wasn't a new affair or a moment of weakness. This was a relationship. "I still can't believe you told Sarah you were in Chicago all week," Vanessa said, laughing as David opened the door. "You're terrible." "What she doesn't know won't hurt her," David replied, his voice carrying none of the warmth Sarah was accustomed to when he spoke about their marriage. "Besides, she's so wrapped up in her work lately, I don't think she'd notice if I disappeared for a month." The casual dismissal of their 8-year marriage, reduced to a convenience that allowed him to sneak around, hit Sarah like a physical blow. She pressed her hand to her mouth to stifle the sob that threatened to escape. But she wasn't prepared for what came next. "When are you going to tell her?" Vanessa asked, her voice becoming more serious as they lingered in the doorway. "We've been talking about this for months, David. I'm tired of being your secret." "Soon," David said, his voice taking on the same tone he used when making promises to difficult clients. "After the Brennan merger closes, after things settle down at the firm, I need to time this right. Sarah will take me for everything if I'm not careful." Sarah's knees nearly buckled. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning a future together. David was already strategizing their divorce, calculating how to minimize his financial exposure while maximizing his chances of starting over with Vanessa. "I love you," Vanessa said, rising on her tiptoes to kiss him. "I just want to stop hiding." "I love you too," David replied, the words Sarah had thought belonged exclusively to her marriage falling easily from his lips. "Just give me a few more weeks to figure out the logistics." They disappeared into the suite, the door closing behind them with a soft click that seemed to echo through Sarah's entire world. She remained frozen in the alcove, her mind struggling to process the magnitude of what she'd just witnessed. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a midlife crisis. David had been living a double life, maintaining an entire relationship while coming home to Sarah each night and playing the role of devoted husband. The man who had held her hair when she was sick, who had cried at their wedding, who had talked about baby names and growing old together. That man was apparently a fiction. Sarah's phone buzzed in her purse, a text from David. "Flight just landed. Home in an hour. Can't wait to see you. Love you so much." The sheer audacity of it, texting her declarations of love while standing in a hotel suite with his mistress, finally broke through Sarah's shock. Rage, pure and cleansing, flooded through her veins. She stepped out of the alcove and walked purposefully to the elevator. But as she waited for it to arrive, another text came through, this one from Vanessa's Instagram account, which Sarah followed. "Perfect Sunday afternoon at the spa. Self-care, blessed." The post showed Vanessa in what appeared to be a hotel bathrobe, her hair in a towel, with the caption posted just moments ago. Even their social media was a lie, carefully curated to maintain the illusion that nothing untoward was happening. The elevator arrived and Sarah stepped inside, catching sight of herself in the mirrored walls. She looked different than she had just an hour ago, older perhaps, but also stronger. The woman staring back at her was no longer the naive wife, who had spent the week making excuses for her husband's behavior. She was someone who now knew the truth and would have to decide what to do with it. As the elevator descended, Sarah realized that David's text had said he'd be home in an hour. That gave her exactly 60 minutes to decide how to handle the conversation that would end their marriage. She could confront him with what she'd witnessed. She could pretend ignorance and gather more evidence, or she could simply pack her bags and leave. But as she walked out of the Ritz-Carlton and into the early evening air of Manhattan, Sarah knew there was really only one choice. She was done being lied to, done being dismissed, done being the convenient wife who made David's double life possible. Her marriage was over. It had been over for months, perhaps longer, without her even knowing it. Now it was time to make that reality official. Sarah hailed a taxi back to Brooklyn, her mind already working through the practical details of untangling 8 years of shared life. She thought about the brownstone they'd bought together, their joint bank accounts, the friends who would have to choose sides. It would be messy and painful and expensive, but at least it would be honest. As the taxi pulled away from the hotel, Sarah didn't look back. She was done with that chapter of her life, even if David didn't know it yet. In an hour, when he walked through their front door with his lies and his fake smile and his practiced declarations of love, he would find a very different woman waiting for him. Sarah Matthews, the real Sarah Matthews, not the one who had been, living in willful blindness, was finally ready to reclaim her life.